Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's virtual session on Learn Ssjs and Discover Ssjs Lib. My name is Eliot Harper, and I'm one of the co-organizers of the Marketing Cloud Developer Group. In today's session, I'll introduce you to the fundamentals of using server-side JavaScript in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Then Sascha Huwald from Luxury Escapes will present his innovative Ssjs Lib, which is sort of like jQuery for Ssjs, as it simplifies the development approach for working with Ssjs and also facilitates rapid development. This session will be recorded, and I'll share a link to the recording along with some sample code and resources after the session. Well, let's get underway. So, just to clarify what I'll be covering for the next 25 minutes, well, I won't be delivering a JavaScript course. I'm assuming that you already have a working knowledge in JavaScript, but if you don't, that's fine too. There are many courses available and online resources to quickly get you started with JavaScript. You really just need to understand the language fundamentals in order to use server-side JavaScript in Marketing Cloud, which even if you have no prior experience in JavaScript, will only really take a few hours. I'll also be covering the following topics. And of course, I've already prepared a few demos, and I'll share my working code examples after our session. Well, let's get underway. Now, server-side JavaScript, or Ssjs, is a scripting language for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. While AmpScript is a proprietary scripting language that enables sophisticated content personalization across channels, Ssjs is based on JavaScript, which is the world's most widely used programming language. And Ssjs enables you to extend the scripting capabilities of Marketing Cloud through an extensive set of functions. There are many use cases for Ssjs, which primarily focus on marketing automation, API integration, and web page development. And while JavaScript can seem intimidating when you're getting started, as I mentioned before, it's actually very easy to learn if you just take time to understand this language syntax and fundamentals. But first, let's just firstly discuss the differences between AmpScript and server-side JavaScript in Marketing Cloud. Like server-side JavaScript, AmpScript is also a server-side scripting language proprietary for a specific runtime environment, that is Salesforce Marketing Cloud, where you can personalize email, mobile, and web content. It's important to note that AmpScript doesn't support JSON, that's JavaScript Object Notation, and it has somewhat limited support for HTTP integrations through a set of HTTP functions. Also, AmpScript functions are pure functions, which mean they take some input and accept an output, but you can't go and create your own functions in AmpScript. Server-side JavaScript is also a server-side scripting language that's proprietary to Salesforce Marketing Cloud, but it's based on JavaScript, and it enables you to interact with platform features. You can use it in automations, in messages, and web pages. And I think it's important to note that while server-side JavaScript can be included in messages through platform functions, which I'll discuss shortly, it's really best practice to reserve its use for script activities and web page for performance considerations. AmpScript is a very extensive scripting language for personalizing content and has a greater number of functions in comparison to the platform functions. However, server-side JavaScript has a considerable larger number of functions, in fact, over 332, I think, in comparison to 148 in AmpScript. And it has much stronger support for external HTTP integrations, specifically when interacting with REST-based APIs that return a JSON payload. Also, you can create your own functions, as this is built on JavaScript. So Server-side JavaScript features in Marketing Cloud can be broadly categorized into the following 4 areas. Core functions really pre-built to support common scripting use cases, and effectively they're wrappers for SOAP API objects, and in turn enable rapid application development. Platform functions are actually similar and aligned with AmScript, but they're separate from the core library, and they're actually faster to use because you can really realize faster performance because the objects exist outside of the library. And then there's the relatively new WS proxy object, which, we've got API functions, which enable you to interact with the Marketing Cloud SOAP API. And AmScript also has a set of API functions. In fact, the server-side JavaScript API functions are just a wrapper for the AmScript API functions. Then we have a WS proxy object, which is a relatively new object for server-side JavaScript, released 2 or 3 years ago. And this object provides an alternative to using API functions, and it's actually much more performant and strongly aligned to JavaScript, which I'll explain shortly. Server-side JavaScript code is contained within HTML script tags and has an additional run@server attribute. Now, this attribute is important as it provides an instruction for the platform to execute the server-side code within it. Note that this server attribute can optionally be enclosed in quotation marks, and typically is. Just a couple of extra keystrokes. Let's now discuss functions in server-side JavaScript. So for those of you who don't have any prior scripting experience, I just need to spend 30 seconds explaining what a function is. In programming, a function is a named section of a program that takes some input values to perform a specific task and produce an output value. Now, I assume that most of you have used Microsoft Excel before. Well, Excel also has functions. Things like sum, count, and average, where values are passed to the functions as arguments in parentheses, just like this example here. Server-side JavaScript includes over 300 functions that enable interoperability with platform features. And as I indicated earlier, function libraries in server-side JavaScript, platform, and core. Let's take a look at each of these libraries in turn. Core functions provide a very convenient method of performing common development use cases. They're lightweight and ideal for rapid development. I do think it's important to mention, however, is that they apply an overhead to the core when you use them, as the platform has to translate between the different runtime environments. And also, these functions essentially serve as a wrapper for the SOAP API. And as a result, you can't access all the object properties. So, they're just designed for some specific use cases. If you want to use or have access to all the properties, then you'd probably need to be using WS Proxy. So in order to use the core functions, we firstly need to load the core library, the core function library, which is represented in this syntax here by this platform.load instruction, where we're passing the version number, which is 1. Note that there are actually several different server-side JavaScript libraries, 3 in fact, but if you just use 1, it will load the latest version 1 library, that is 1.1.5. So you don't have to go and explicitly say declare or set the subversion. Now, a complete list of all available core functions is available on the Marketing Cloud Developer Center. But let's now explore some common functions and how they're used. What I'm going to do is actually create a script activity that will back up an existing data extension. So perhaps we have a data extension in Marketing Cloud that contains is our master customer list. But as you well know, that the problem with these data extensions is that someone can accidentally delete them or overwrite them. And what we want to do is create a daily snapshot of a specific data extension as a backup, so we can historically review the records within it on a given day. So we're going to create a script activity that is used in a schedule automation to create a data extension and copy the records from a master data extension. So here we are in Marketing Cloud. I'll just go over to data extensions and we'll see, as page loads, or maybe it doesn't load. Let me refresh. I've had this page open for quite some time now, so maybe the session's timed out. We'll see. Oh, great. Okay. It's just typical, isn't it? So I've just got to log back in. So just allow me to do that. And of course, I'm going to close down on my other tabs. That's frustrating. And I've enabled 2FA on this account, so I just need to go and grab the access token and paste this in here using handoff. I'll just close down these other tabs because they're not going to serve to, maybe I'll keep that open. It's probably already logged me. It has logged me out. Good. Now I've stored this data extension in the root level. And I don't know why it's not loading for me at the moment, but we'll see if it does. And I'll just open up a contact builder as a backup. Yeah, that is quite peculiar. Anyway, let's see whether we can get to other stuff. Okay, so let's go and show you the data extension here. One more time, subscribers data extensions. I'm keen to show you it in within Email Studio, if possible. Here we go. Fantastic. So I've got my master's customers data extension here, which contains 5 records. Now I've created a script activity, so let me just go and open up that activity in Automation Studio. And here it is. So it's just a single automation with one script activity. And we view this, we can look at the code within it. Let me just go and click edit so we can see get a bigger screen view. So let me talk you through what's happening here. So firstly, we're loading the core library. Next, what I'm doing is defining a data extension name that I want to go and create along with a key. Now, obviously, data extension names and external keys need to be unique. So I'm going and suffixing it with a timestamp. That is, I'm using this JavaScript math round function here to go and generate a unique timestamp that's as a numeric integer and append it as a value. So next we go and declare our object of the fields that we want to include in our sendable data extension, in our data extension. So you can see that this is expressed in JSON format here, and it provides a very kind of easy to read and code approach to defining the fields we want to include. And this is actually a kind of sendable data extension. So we've provided a relationship here. So we've defined the object. And once we've done that, then we're going to go and use this data extension add function to go and create the data extension. And once we've done that, we can now go and retrieve the existing data extension records in our master customers data extension. And this goes and returns a JSON object of all of the available records. And I can now simply go and take this this JSON object, it's kind of I've defined as this data variable, and simply go and initialize that data extension I created earlier, and then add the resulting rows that I retrieved to my new data extension. So let's go and run this and see this in action. So if we return to here, just a quick tip, if you want to start an automation immediately, if I just go and click run all activities once, click run, it will start. So if I just jump back to here, this is my master customers, and hopefully, oh, maybe it hasn't run just yet. Let's see what's happening. It's running at the moment. No, there we go, it's run now. So we return back to here, and I'll load my data extension folder, and there it is. It's just created this backup data extension folder with that unique integer, and you can see that it's created this sendable data extension, and here are our records. So in just a few lines of code, I was able to go and create a new data extension, retrieve data from an existing data extension, and take those values and use to populate this data extension. Now, and probably you'd also want to apply a data retention policy. But as I indicated, the use cases for these core functions are quite limited. If you want to do that, then you'd need to use WS Proxy to create the data extension with a retention policy. And then, yeah, if I run it again, it will just go, let me just quickly run it again, since we've got a little bit of time. Just run it from here. Select all activities, run now. And then when we come back in a few minutes, we'll see the additional data extension created. So let's just jump back to my presentation and discuss platform functions. So platform functions do have some overlap with core functions in that there are several platform functions that provide similar capabilities to core functions, but they really in short, provide a function library that's actually comparable with AmScript, except it's JavaScript based. Now, with platform functions, unlike the core functions, you don't need to use the core library. It's included by default. So if you're just exclusively using platform functions, there's no need to go and call it. They're actually more performant than core functions. And they can be used in messages and landing pages and applications, whereas core functions can't be used in messages. So these functions are denoted by a platform object prefix, which you'll see against the function name. And again, you can see comprehensive documentation on all publicly available platform functions in the Salesforce Marketing Cloud Developer Center. So let's go and have a look at platform functions in action. So what I'm going to do is I want to have a simple use case to retrieve a live weather feed from an external API. And then based on a city that I define, I'm going to display the current temperature on a page using AmScript. So let's go and take a look at my code here. So I might just try and zoom in because it's probably quite small for you. It's actually a very simple script. So as you see, I haven't had to load the core library. I've gone and defined the API key. So because I'm using an external service, WeatherStack, I've had to go and obtain a key, but it's free to use. You can go and do the same thing. And then I'm going and using the platform getQueryString parameter function, which is very similar to the Marketing Cloud request parameter function, in that it retrieves the value of a URL parameter, in this case city. And here I have in a nested if statement. If the value exists, then it's going to process this block of code within it. So firstly, I'm building the URL by concatenating these values together. And then very similar to the AmScript HTTP function, HTTP get function, I just go and call this URL. And then this URL actually returns back a JSON feed. And I'm using this parse JSON function to take, which takes a JSON string and is able to go and get objects within that JSON, get keys within that JSON object. So in this case, it returns a current, it returns a temperature key in a current object and a fields like key. And I'm using the set value platform function to go and set these values as an AmScript variable, so I can then use it on my page. So these set value and get value platform functions enable you to interact with AmScript. So you can use AmScript and server-side JavaScript together. And then some very simple AmScript down the bottom here. We're saying that if the city isn't empty, then I'll go and display this string. So let's go and see what this looks like. I'm just going to go and, if I go and click on this link here, we should come up with a blank page because I haven't passed any URL parameters. But if I go and add a city is Melbourne at the end, you can see that the current temperature in Melbourne is 13 degrees and it feels like 11. If I just go and change this to Sydney, what's it like in Sydney today? Let's have a look. It's 19 degrees and feels like 19. Right, it's obviously not windy. Let's now talk a bit about API functions and WS Proxy and server-side JavaScript. So API functions enable you to go and interact with a SOAP API. However, there are a few considerations in using these API functions, in that, firstly, they add a performance of overhead to the processing of the calls, as the code translates the data between the different language runtimes. Secondly, they're limited to common use cases and don't extend to all available SOAP API objects, and are typically constrained to specific object properties. And they can be really challenging to debug and suppress any meaningful errors. So as an alternative to using core functions, both AmScript and server-side JavaScript provide support for interacting with Marketing Cloud SOAP API methods through a set of platform API functions. So the implementation of these functions in server-side JavaScript and AmScript is remarkably similar. In fact, apart from the language syntax and fundamentals, they're identical. So these screenshots here indicate the AmScript code that's used to deliver a triggered sender email on our left using AmScript, and the equivalent server-side JavaScript code on the right. But the problem with this approach and using these API functions is that the code performs sequential operations following a highly verbose procedural programming approach. And it's really highly repetitive. It requires many lines of code to achieve a single operation, and can be very challenging to conceptualize the relationships between the different objects used in an operation. So look, we could spend time reviewing how to go and use the API, but instead I want to fast forward to WS Proxy, as this is really if you need to interact with the SOAP API, then you really need to be considering using WS Proxy. As this name implies, WS Proxy acts as a proxy between the Marketing Cloud SOAP API web service and server-side JavaScript. So this object is available in all non-send contexts, and has the same restrictions in place as other SOAP API access methods. WS Proxy is specifically designed to address the limitations of the server-side JavaScript core library functions and the programming paradigm of their platform API functions I mentioned earlier. So ironically, WS Proxy uses JSON to express object properties instead of XML. And actually, it's a surprisingly good fit, as the API objects are expressed as JSON objects, and child API objects use arrays, which neatly align with JSON arrays. But simply put, WS Proxy simply instructs on what needs to be done rather than instructing how to do it. Let's now take a look at WS Proxy in action. So we're going to extend on the previous example I showed you and send a triggered send email when a user visits a web page. So I've already gone and created my email. It's a very simple text-based email. I'll just quickly show you here. And training. And it's I'm pretty sure it's in here somewhere. Weather forecast, there we go. So if I just go and edit this email, you can see it's, yeah, I'm just saying that current temperature in this is this and feels like this. So we're using the attribute function to go and take the attribute that we're passing through in a triggered send. Let's go and take a look at the actual code now on our cloud page. So firstly, what I've done is created an HTML form on our page. And when a user goes and submits this, it will go and post it back to itself. And we're going to go and get the form field that's been submitted, and specifically the city field and email fields on the form. And if those if values exist, then we're going to process this block of code within it. So firstly, we go and get that city field that we got from the form field, and we define temp and fields as in the syntax here. Now I initialize the WS Proxy object. So you do this by using this approach here. I've gone and set the key. This is the triggered send external key for that email I created earlier. And I've gone and set a subscriber key that we're going to send the email to. But this is our triggered send definition. Now, if you look at the SOAP API object, you'll see that this closely aligns or actually matches the properties available in the triggered send definition object, or the triggered send object. But here, obviously, we're describing this in JSON format rather than XML. And then it's very simple. All I do down the bottom is I go and then create, using a create method to go and create a new triggered send, which is the object name of the SOAP API object. And the TS, this is our the object that we defined earlier. And then once I've done that, I go and set an AMScript variable, which is then used to define what to display on the page. So if that is, we sent the email, then it's going to say that an email has been sent to your address. Well, let's go and see this in action. So I'm just going to go and click on this link here and type in the city, Melbourne. and Eliot.Harper@salesforcemvps.com. Submit. And there it has, an email's been sent to your address. So this is actually a normal send, and it's going to take a minute for it to arrive, but we can see the progress. If we just jump into here, let me zoom out. And we can see our weather report v2, there's one in the queue there. So yeah, in the next 30 seconds, I'll go and receive that email. But rather than just waiting for it to appear, kind of like a cooking show, here's one I created earlier. I'll just jump in. It was open earlier. Anyway, I take my word for it. I'll go and receive that email, that plain text email populated with those values. Well, I'm out of time now. At this time, I'd like to hand over to Sascha, who's going to be talking through Ssjs lib.
Thank you, Eliot. Can you stop sharing your screen? Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Eliot, for this nice introduction into the world of Ssjs. My name is Sascha Huwald. I'm a senior manager at Luxuryscapes and the creator of the Ssjs library, which I want to present you today. And I assume that you have a bit of knowledge in JavaScript to understand what I'm showing you. If not, stay along, but it would be helpful if you have a bit understanding of JavaScript in general. So what is the Ssjs library? The Ssjs library is a free open source code project, which is currently under development, and it's from the community for the community. It is an easy available software throughout GitHub, and currently has more than 6,000 lines of code. And it aims to solve common problems in Ssjs, which we're facing in Salesforce Marketing Cloud. It allows you for faster development, reduce potential errors, and tries to reduce redundancy of coding. As you may know and have seen, Ssjs in Salesforce Marketing Cloud is very unique. And with this comes a few problems. So the Ssjs library removed a lot of guesswork and tries to help you to reduce research time you need to spend by utilizing the knowledge shared by the community already. It also extends the basic function of Ssjs with modern JavaScript methods, such as array search and array filter. So where can you use the Ssjs library? The Ssjs library can be used anywhere in Marketing Cloud where Ssjs is being allowed to be used. As Eliot mentioned, it could be in script activities, cloud pages, email studio, and mobile connect. Where it really shines is in script activity and cloud pages. So for example, with script activities, as Eliot mentioned, there's a use case for external services information like the weather service to be pulled into your system and pre-processed before you want to send out an email. This is only really possible with Ssjs. So with Ssjs library, you actually can easily access that without writing a lot of lines of code, and sometimes just need 1 line or 2 lines of code to achieve the same thing you have to do with normal Ssjs. In cloud pages, it allows you to, as Eliot showcases as well, use external services, but also the Ssjs library helps you to make cloud pages more secure, enables authentication, and has a lot of helper functions to really speed up your process, a development process. It also is available in Email Studio, as mentioned, but as Eliot said, there is limitations with Email Studio because speed is paramount, and every rendering of an email takes up time, and especially when Ssjs has a lot of computing to be done, then that eats away of time of rendering that email, therefore the send will be slower. So if you have a large batch sent out, you may reconsider using Ssjs and go back to AmpScript. But depending on the use case, again, because you have objects and arrays and you can actually save and store things during runtime and during processing, there is use cases for that in Email Studio. And another use case is in Mobile Connect, where, for example, a customer receives an SMS message and he replies to this SMS message with a keyword, let's say yes. We fetching this keyword with Ssjs, and then we actually triggering a journey out of that keyword and creating a case for an account manager, which then can call this person. This is very easy to do with the Ssjs library. So how do you get started with the Ssjs library? It's very simple. All you need to do is you need to create a cloud page. You add this code, which I will share after the presentation. And then you can open up the cloud page, and that will install everything on your Salesforce Marketing Cloud instance in your current business unit where you run this cloud page. And that allows you to have everything from the library straight up on your system. There's a detailed blog post about it on the webpage of blog.email360.io getting started, which explains a bit more in detail what actually happens. There's also a documentation for this entire library on docs.email360.io, which allows you easily to find functions and methods. But also, because it's an open source project, it's completely open source on GitHub, and you can see every script ever being installed on your system before you even want to install it. So what will be installed and created? Well, in a nutshell, there's only two things really being created. First are data extensions, and the second are code snippets inside Content Builder. So the data extension, the usage of data extension for this library is to store data temporary or even permanently. Things like user authentication or API tokens, or even logging errors, which is helpful and useful in a wider scale than outside this library. The code snippet itself are just the library code snippet itself. So as it is Ssjs code, it basically needs to run on your server where you don't want to run it from an external server. So it will be a blank copy of the system on GitHub into your Marketing Cloud instance, and therefore you have all the code in your Marketing Cloud. And then there's other helping pages like error page and login page. If you have any questions to what exactly will be installed, I'm happy to answer any question after that, but I want to really go into a live demo with you and showcase what will help you, where can the Ssjs library actually help you. So I will jump quickly into the live demo. So just a quick one on how I present this now. So maybe a few of you people will know that there is a function which it's called treat as content, which allows you to bit more faster development as well. Rather than writing your Ssjs code in the editor of Salesforce Marketing Cloud and then try to save and publish and sometimes wait up to 5 minutes to refresh the page, you can actually write your code in any of your preferred editors and save it to, let's say, GitHub or Dropbox, and then just reference that code into the cloud page itself for the development part. And then every time you save your file locally and upload it to GitHub or Dropbox in that sample, it will automatically update the file on the cloud page as well. So you don't need to save and publish anything anymore. So that's what I'm doing here right now. I'm just having a Ssjs demo, Ssjs on my Dropbox, and that's what I'm going to do. So if I'm clicking on that, it actually opens the cloud page right now. So this is a simple cloud page. There's nothing fancy on it. I'm not bothering right now to make a nice viewing of a cloud page. It's a very simple HTML. So the code for this cloud page is in here. So I want to go step by step to a few things. So as Eliot mentioned, you have your first part, which is your run at server script opening tag, and then you're loading your core platform, which is required for the library to run. But then if you actually want to run the library itself, you would need to load a content block, which is the email360 Ssjs lib. By doing so, you enable everything from the library inside your code. So this code can be just copied into a script activity, or it can be copied then later on into a cloud page. So one of the first thing which I found really annoying when I was starting writing Ssjs is the lack of real debugging kind of things, where I really struggled to find things or have a visualization of debugging, enabling debugging modes. So let's assume we have the current way of debugging. Sorry, my keyboard is not working. So the current way is, let's say we have an object where we do a lookup of a data extension, similar to a lookup rows of mscript, where you just pull some data from a data extension. So now we want to see what we get back. The current way of how you debug these kind of things is you technically just write this out and you stringify the object because it's an object and you need to escape special characters in there. So if I'm doing that and go back to the cloud page and I refresh that, So what I'm getting now is actually the output of a data extension. That's good, but the problem is I can't really read it. Like, it's really hard to understand what is an integer, what is a string, where things living, how is the structure really. And also it really makes it unusable for a production environment, because I can't just simply test something, because that will destroy the entire page itself. So with the library, there's a neat function which is called debugging. So if I want to enable debugging, I have to first say, okay, I want to create a debug mode. So the debug mode has 3 possible values: console, text, and HTML. You can use them on its own, or you can combine them as you like. Console will output anything which has to be debugged into the console of the browser. HTML will output as an HTML formatted string into the web page as write stringify does. And then you would have text, which is mainly used for things like AJAX strings, where you're actually expecting a JSON format back. So if I would enable that, and now I want to output that, instead of saying write stringify, I'm just saying debug the object, and I go back. I now need, obviously, to open up my console, so because it's the only time where I can see it, and I refresh the page. What I will see now is my page still stays the same, and I don't have all this information written down on the front page, but now I have it inside my console, and I actually can see a complete full structure of the data coming back from the data extension. So I actually see there's a field called Boolean, which has a false value, there's a date in there, there's a string. This helps me a lot to really debug things on runtime and don't mess up my entire view of my page. Additional to that, you can also just do debugging on a lot of other things, like simple text messages. My keyboard is not working, sorry for that. So if I refresh that, so what we're going to do now is we just simply put a text out. This helps me to navigate through code when complex code is executed, and I need to know what has been executed and where it's actually failing. So that's the first thing I want to showcase, is the debug function. The other one is, which I find really important, is when you develop complex code. The weather example from Eliot was a very simple way, but let's say you have a way more complex system, and you're actually sending out an email which has a lot of dependencies on values coming back. And you don't want to send out emails if things are not coming back as you would expect. You need somehow raise an error. And then you actually need to log this error somewhere so you are aware of it. Currently, what you will find is if you raise an error in Mscript or even in Ssjs, you will get a trigger sent warning. And that has been improved. It has been, took a while. Now it's coming right quite quickly, but still someone needs to monitor that inbox. The admin needs to see that and act on that. And you're losing a log and like an overview of that as well. So we found it very paramount that we have something where we store errors when we find an error. So let's assume we have a very simple error, which is called isError is true. So we have our debug mode is enabled. So one thing to note on that level, if you are in a debug mode, errors will be just written to the console, but not into the data extension. Because during development, you don't want to actually add errors into your error log, where people may get an email or get an alert for just because you're developing something. So when your debug mode is enabled, errors will not be written into the error log. So for that purpose, we just disable the error log. So what we're doing is, if error is true, and we're saying it is true as a condition right now, then we just log an error with this message from that method and from that source. So if I would refresh now the page, because we don't act on anything, we don't break anything, we don't stop anything, the page will still be loading as usual. Nothing really visually changed. But now we have a log error data extension, which now has an entry in it. So as you can see, there's other fields like subscriber key, source type, job ID, list ID, and batch ID. We're using this normally as well when we're using it for send outs, where then we have a unique identifier to job, list ID, and batch IDs to really pinpoint that error. And what you can do then with that is you actually can have a cloud page again, which then lists your all errors real time and see if any send failing because of dependency missing. However, if you now enable debugging again, you will not create this error on the error log, but you will actually see the error in your console. There's an additional thing you can see now, which is an ID. This ID is the unique ID which you can see in the data extension. It's different from that because it's technically a new error, because I refreshed the page. But this event ID actually allows you to not sending every information out to a person who needs to probably take care of it, but you can just reference this an event ID and say, hey, here's the event ID from this error. Can you please check this error out? Or you can display it for a customer, like, oops, something went wrong. Please contact our support with this error message, which is just the event ID. And then support can forward that to the admin and say, well, something goes wrong there, especially when you're working with cloud pages and dependency are missing and things like that. So this is the error logging. The next thing I want to showcase you are cloud pages in general. So as Eliot was showing you, there is a cloud page he created where you have an input. So how do you use cloud pages with the Ssjs library? So you initialize a new cloud page by using new cloud page. It's a module inside the library which you can just initialize, and that enables you any functionality inside the Ssjs library cloud pages directly on your page. So let's say we initialize the cloud page. Again, we have a debug mode in console. We initialize the cloud page. We're asking for a payload ABC, and we want to output the payload into the console. So if I go to the cloud page and refresh it, nothing will really change. You will have now the payload sitting in here, but it's empty because we didn't add any payload. If we now add a payload of ABC123 and refresh the page, you can easily see now that there is ABC123 in that cloud page. That's well and easy, but the problem is, like, you would say, well, I'm not normally doing ABC123, or if I do ABC123, that can be done very simply outside this kind of library. But there's another function, or inside this payload, you can actually say if it's true, so it becomes mandatory. So what happened now if you refresh it, because we have this parameter actually has been shown. But if you remove the parameter, because it's mandatory, you're not ending up on the cloud page anymore. You're ending up on an invalid call. So that's very important if you, for example, expecting things to work on this cloud page, and you have a closed system where people are receiving an email, they're coming to the page and everything is working, but someone forges the data and does not present you the data, then you're actually not executing the cloud page. If you would do that without the JavaScript library, the Ssjs library, you would have to write a lot of if statements, going to query string parameters, and so on and so forth. So I want to showcase you another thing, because we're running out of time quickly. I just want to showcase you something for the cloud pages as well, where let's say you have a cloud page which should be accessible for your team members only. Let's say you have a designated team looking after certain content pages or dashboards information, and they need to log into that page. So what you can do is you can actually do additional parameter inside the cloud page, which is, let's say, login in that example. So you say this cloud page is protected by a login. So what that does, if we go back and refresh that page, what it actually does for you, it actually brings you to a login page because it is protected by a login. You can't go to that page. So if we would log in, and that comes out of the box with the Ssjs library. If you log in, you actually get returned back to the page you came from. Plus, it keeps preserve your parameter you had. Now, instead of just having the object with ABC123, you also have a Jwt token. So the authentication completely works on a Jwt token. If you're not aware of what Jwt is, I'm happy to explain it after that. But it's basically an authentication method used widely for tokenization and authentication. So what you have an expiry, how long this token is available for 24 hours, where the issuer is, the page ID, and then you have the user, which was my admin name for it. That is for login. So now that's okay, but you not necessarily want to have that for a customer. A customer probably should not log in every time, or there should not be a case where login is required for a customer, let's say to reach a preference page. But there is the need that you have a preference page where you can update your preferences, and only people from an email should use that. So there's another function which is in the cloud page, which is called Jwt, which allows you to not using a login page, but the simple Jwt token. So if I refresh that page now, I don't have a Jwt token as a parameter sent to it, so I get an authentication failed. However, if I would go into my email, which is generating a Jwt token, and I click on the protected cloud page with a Jwt token, it actually allows me to access this cloud page again. And what has changed is now you have a query string parameter with a Jwt token attached, and you have a different Jwt token. And this Jwt token has no expiration date. It's basically running indefinitely, but it only allows you to access to this page, which is the hash value of this current page. So now you have only access with this token to that page. No one else can access this page without having a valid Jwt token. And the Jwt token is only generated as soon as you're sending out this email. So that makes cloud pages very secure for yourself and for your customers and for your co-workers in your business. So this is a big advantage of this cloud page. I'm literally running out of time here. I just want to give you quickly overview. There is a documentation for it. And for example, if you're looking at what Eliot has done with copying a data extension, there was a limit in that, and there was a question in the chat with how many records can be copied. Well, the way how Eliot was doing it, there's only 2,500 records being able to copy. And it was a very simplified version. There's a lot of things you need to consider when you copy a data extension into a backup. So we came up across with something called copy data extension. So there's a function inside the wrapper of WS Proxy, which copy a data extension with records and with everything in it. I don't want to showcase it right now because I didn't have it set up, but I'm happy to give you more information about these kind of things. But there's a lot of functions which you easily can use out of the box without having a deep understanding of how WS Proxy needs to work, Ssjs needs to work. You just need to basically write a one-line code and get everything out of that. So I think that's for now. And I think we open up for question because we have only 7 minutes left.
That's right. Sascha, thank you so much for that very informative and impressive demonstration of Ssjs lib. I'm just blown away, particularly with that, how you're passing Jwt, the JSON web token. It's something that I've been scratching my head how to do for some time, but it's great to see how effortlessly you can do that. So yeah, now we've got time for questions. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to post them to the chat panel available in the tray of this webinar app. Any questions for Sascha or myself on anything Ssjs? This is your perfect opportunity to do so. Yeah, so David asks, can the login functionality work with SSO or single sign-on? Have you thought about, Sascha, building like a three-legged auth flow to use something like the authenticating with Google or some other authentication service?
Yes, so the way how it works right now, and just for the demo and for the use case of this library, and it's coming in this way, is utilizing a data extension. But the way how normally it's been working and how we are also doing it is by using our own authentication service. So
okay.
It's basically a very simple way on the login page. When you're generating a token, you authenticate that on a third-party services, and then you get a true back that you authenticated, and then you generate the token after that and can pass all information from that token. Or you can even use that token from that specific SSO system. There is a blog post about that, how you actually do that with an external service on the block of our website.
Great, thank you. Yusuf asked, can Ssjs lib be installed into a parent EID, enterprise ID, and used by children BUs? So do you have to install it into each BU?
Yes, so it is. You can install it in the parent EID, and then you would need to put it in a shared folder, obviously, to have it available in the shared in the child business unit. And that's very powerful for WS Proxy, because WS Proxy allows you to talk to all your child business units from the parent unit. So you can actually control data extensions from your child business unit in the parent business unit. But you need to have that in the parent unit. You can't have that in the child business unit and then access another child business unit. So yes, you can totally install that in that. As I say, it's just code snippets, which you need to move into the shared folder then in order to work.
Okay. Now I've got another, thank you. I've got another question. Don't really understand it. Can we lock any particular cloud page using server-side JavaScript so others can't see? Lock as in only after entering password it can be accessed. I mean, I thought that's the example that you showed us, where you're providing password-based authentication to a cloud page.
So with there's two things, right? So with the login, the idea of a login is that everyone after they logged in, they have access to any cloud page which is protected by a login. Okay. However, if you using JWT, you actually can specify which pages are accessible by that. So let's say you have an email which has a preference center link in it, and you have an email which has a survey link in it, and these are only accessible for certain people. You can say that one token is only available for this page, and the other token is available for this page. So even if someone takes this token and then reuse it on the other page, it will not work because there's a limitation on the pages you can see. But this is all set up when you're generating this token. There's a function for that to generate a token. And I also have written an mscript function to generate a token, which does exactly the same thing as the token generation of Ssjs.
And I'm just curious, I mean, that Jwt or JSON Web Token token that you generated, I mean, this is be encrypted as a, using an algorithm and token type? This is a proper Jwt, is it? Because I just couldn't figure out how to encode.
And it is encrypted with SHA 252 or 256.
Okay.
So it's properly encrypted. The signature is, so how it works, maybe I share quickly my screen, just one more.
Yeah, if you could. Yeah, I'm fascinated.
So what we have, actually, we have an authentication data extension, which has a value which is a secret. You can use that. It's generated. So if you install the Sshs library on your system, this value is generated. It's not, you can copy it, it doesn't help you at all. It doesn't do anything. It's just a secret value which we generated every time the library is installed. And so what it does, it actually takes a login value for the login and use this as a secret to actually then mask everything to the JWT. So you have your JWT header, you have your payload, and you have your signature. And the signature is basically, so how it works is it takes the header and the payload, mix it together with the secret, mix it together as a hash value. That is then your key. And then inside your token, you have your header and your payload. But every time that token needs to be validated, it actually validates a combination of that against the secret and see if everything is still the same. So even if you would change the payload, the output will not be the same anymore. And that is all handled in the library already for you.
Right. Okay.
So if you want to create a new token, if you want to create a new JWT page protection, you just basically put a new key in here, create your own secret. And because the secret is not available to the outside world, outside Salesforce Marketing Cloud, is very secure because you can't really get into Marketing Cloud from the outside and get this key unless you have access to it. Okay.
Yeah, it would be great to say, have you considered storing that key in key management and just passing the external key of the key, as a, sorry?
It's all possible in that. It's not built that way yet, but there's no problem of it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. You can also use, if you use locking, you can also use your Salesforce Marketing Cloud locking credentials and use that way of it. But it's all coming down to when you're generating the key, you want to make this differentiation. But for the ease of use of this library, it's saved in the data extension for now.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks again, Sascha, for spending the time walking us through Ssjs Lib. I hope that you got a lot of value out of this session and learned something about server-side JavaScript if you didn't already know about it. We'll be sending out a link to this presentation along with the code examples that I supplied, and of course, all the links and resources to Ssjs Lib. I really encourage you to explore Ssjs Lib. As you've seen, it's a very powerful and easy to use library for rapid development with Marketing Cloud. So Sascha, thanks again.
If anyone hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any questions. It is an open source code project. So if you have any questions, if you have any contribution, feel free to go to GitHub and share your knowledge. And I'm happy to take any suggestion on board and extend this library, because it should be for the community to speed up work process in Ssjs.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Sascha, and thanks for joining.
Thanks.